Hello and welcome to the How2Exit Podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How2Exit Podcast. Today I'm here with Paul Neal. He is a financial strategist and author of a book. I think it's called Unlease Your Business. Unlease Your Business. I keep wanting to say leash, but unlease your business. And it's Unlock Wealth, Autonomy, and Control by buying your building and firing your landlords. So I think I got it right. Did I get that right?
You got it right. You sure did, Ronald.
Cool. So we've had some people, we were talking about before the show, we've had a lot of people on the show and we talked about different strategies. I've had one other guy who's like, no, you got to keep the real estate. Most of the people that come on here are like, no, you sell the real estate off to fund the transaction. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I want to learn what you know and get the knowledge from you. So we talked a little bit about the show, but share with the audience kind of your background and how you ended up in this book, in this space, and what led you up to wanting to write the book and to get this message out.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Ronald. I've been in the real estate finance space. I got into it in 1998. My background was actually engineering, and really just because I was good at math and science, but I had more of an interest in finance and wealth creation and business ownership than I did engineering, although I built 6 companies, and so there's some, and sold one, and so there's some engineering involved with that, right? But I've been fascinated with real estate finance and real estate for quite some time. And I kind of sort of tangentially got into real estate finance when I was looking to buy my first home, only because I had a business at that point and it was operating pretty well, generating a nice income, and didn't require a whole lot of time. And I remember going through the home buying experience on the residential side. Had never bought a home before, never financed one. And it was a horrible experience. And I thought, wow, this was terrible. And I thought, man, I could do that so much better and so much easier. And so I learned the business. Won't get into a lot of detail there, but ended up launching a business on the residential side in 1998 and ran that for about 10 years until the global financial meltdown. In the meanwhile, I got very interested in the commercial side because so many of my friends and the circle I ran with and so forth were business owners and entrepreneurs. And I had businesses as well. And so we always talked about business finance and commercial real estate. And long story short, I really went head first into it. About 5 years ago, I had a little interruption in 2008, like I said, where the world sort of crashed. I sort of moved tangentially and spun up a data extraction company with another friend, and we built that over a number of years and then eventually sold it. The last few years of that, I was really hankering to get back into real estate finance. And again, the commercial just kind of rang my bell. And I started to notice that a lot of the people that I knew and associated with in terms of business owners and entrepreneurs, they're all trying to build freedom and wealth. And they've kind of fell into 2 classes. There was the one group that rented the space that their businesses were in that were growing. And these were profitable businesses. These were not startups, the first couple of year kind of thing. And then the other group that didn't. And the sort of the benefits of one versus the other. Like I had a great friend, Kathy, she was an OBGYN. And she was not an entrepreneur per se, but a high net worth, high producing professional. And her husband kind of kicked her into the idea of buying the building that the practice operated in. So I watched her over a number of years, and she was approached by one of these large venture funds that was buying up small medical practices and whatnot. So they bought her out because she was getting close to retirement. She bought her out for a nice, very nice sum of money. She negotiated staying with the business, as the OBGYN for 3, 4, 5 years, kind of on her own terms before she totally retired. And they had this building that they had purchased and it was completely paid off. They owned the building. And so now the company that bought her out agreed just to rent the building from her because that was the practice. That's where the patients were coming. And so she's created this 5-figure retirement stream just from the one piece of real estate outside everything else she did. And the fascinating thing to me was that the 12, 13 years it took her to pay off the building, she was going to pay rent to somebody anyway. Time was going to go by anyway. But the difference was the substantial amount of a retirement plan that was kind of baked in, kind of forced in. And now she has options, right? She could 1031 exchange that. She could do a lot of different, sell the building, do a lot of different things. But there was that versus the other. I had countless people I know that have had businesses and they want to sell them, or they get to this one just the other day. He basically closed his business down after 30 years. It was I guess a lifestyle business, right? He had a good income, but he rented the space for 20 some odd years. And he was just lamenting on, man, wow, I wish I would have bought the space because now what I have this building is worth a couple $1 million, just a few years later, and time goes on. And so I became fascinated with this idea of why don't business owners buy the building, buy the space for all the benefits that are associated with it. And there's a lot of reasons they don't, but the biggest reason that I came to my conclusion was there's just a lot of ignorance out there and they don't know. And business owners are heads down doing their thing, right? Trying to grow their business. And so many of them are so busy in the technical aspects. They're not really building a business anyway. They're working in the business, which is a whole nother topic. But that's kind of the long sort of intro to how I got where I am and why I do what I do and why I wrote the book, because I want to provide at least an educational platform to open the eyes of that business owner to say, okay, maybe I should consider this.
I have so many questions. Let's start with, because it's just like my head's turning here. I can see where a lot of businesses, it makes a lot of sense, right? I'm thinking things like your automotive repair, your things where the OGBYN, your customer's coming to you, right? What worries me now is this push for working from home, remote work and all that. So general office space, I see a huge push right now for finding a high end. I was in real estate for a while too. And it's always what's the highest and best use of the facility, right? What are you going to do with all this office space now when so many people are working from home? You got to figure out what the new highest and best use for that facility is going to be. And there are just going to be businesses where it makes sense for the business transaction to happen at the facility. Like I was saying, I say auto repair, but for the last 4 or 5 years, I've had a mobile mechanic come to my business and work on my car. I've had my whole front end redone, everything, brakes turned and rotors replaced, you name it. A lot of businesses are at risk right now where they've got a lot of real estate that they don't need so much because half their workers went home and are remote working. Is there certain businesses where you see this as more viable than others, or you think it's still a good idea to come up with that higher and better use and rent the office space to somebody else that would need it?
Yeah, I mean, yes and yes. I think that it presents this change in sort of the workforce distribution, creates opportunity for people to maybe buy some space that they couldn't buy before. I'm not an advocate of going out and buying sort of plain vanilla office space for a lot of the reasons just mentioned. I'm very careful to sort of qualify what I think is a good, a business that's really sort of fit for this type of thing. One that has a need for a local presence, right? Okay, so that is the number one thing. And what does that mean? Well, it means that you have to have employees come to your office for some reason. You have customers or patients or clients that have to come to a local location. And for the protracted future, that will be the case. That could be your veterinarian. Yes, you could have a vet show up at your door. You could have a mobile vet, but let's be honest, they're not going to take over the world. Mobile vets, right? Somebody's got to board your dog and your cat when you go on your Aspen ski trip for 3 weeks as a business owner, right? Your chiropractors, your dentists, your doctors, your auto mechanic, by and large, home service business, right? You talked about having a pest control company. Well, if it's just you and a truck, then you probably don't need space. But if you have 10 trucks and employees and you have to have meetings, and you have to have other equipment and maybe some inventory, you could make a case that you could use minimum space and use, just in time delivery and all that. although that didn't work out so well during COVID either. Those types of businesses that have a need for that, the space is our prime target, right? But, a business that's going to be totally e-commerce, you got virtual assistants distributed all over the world, you got employees all over the world, all over the country, then that might not be the best use of your capital. But another reason you would buy your space is if you have related businesses that maybe you're the vet and maybe you want to lease out part of your building to the grooming company. Maybe you don't want to own the grooming company, or maybe you do. Maybe you set someone up in that space and they lease that back from you to help pay the freight. So there's a host of reasons why. Again, I do believe and agree with you, highest and best use. I'm not really sure what's going to happen to the 20 and 30 and 40-story Class A office building. Not really sure what shopping malls are going to turn into. There's a litany of opportunities there, right? But I just know the other thing that is happening out there is that as we get more and more sort of AI centric, right? Everyone walks around like a little chat robot, that we're human beings. And the more things get sort of impersonal, the more personal experience we want. You look at, like, for instance, the music industry, right? Obviously, Apple completely changed to flip the model from we're going to tour as a band for exposure and live on beans and franks, and hopefully we sell millions of albums. That's where our revenue comes in. To we're going to sell songs for $1, and Apple's going to get 35% of that, and we're not going to make anything because people are only going to get the songs they want. But we're going to go tour. We're going to charge $400, $500, $1,000 a ticket because people want that in-person experience. And I think people want that. I know personally I do. I like to go walk downtown and see the people and go to the coffee shops, which that's another great example, the little microbrewery, that those are popping up everywhere. So there's a lot of reasons, a lot of businesses where it makes sense if they have a need to be there and can justify it over the long run.
Yeah, we looked into this space for a while. There's all kinds of things you can do inside of the commercial real estate space too. A lot of people think, well, I don't want to be in the commercial real estate space. I don't want to be my own landlord, like the new business owners. I had one recently. Guy goes, I don't want to own my building. I want to go there and run my business, and I don't want to worry about the roof or the heat and air. And it's like, you haven't looked at commercial space, have you? You know what triple net is? He's like, yeah, I think I'm looking at 3 buildings right now to be in, and they're triple net. I said, read that closely because you're going to take care of everything you just told me you didn't want to do. It's
Right.
really hard to find commercial space where the landlord is a landlord like like he was thinking, where they take care of
Yeah.
everything, right?
Right.
Most of them are triple net where you're taking care of all that and some, which is brilliant side of the thing. There's all kinds of other things like your little strip malls you're talking about, right? If you're the coffee shop and you don't want to own the whole strip mall, there's a thing called tenants in common. You guys can buy it all together and separate your space out and own it as a business entity as tenants in common, right? There's all kinds of cool stuff to do. I liked that, I don't know what they're going to do with the big sky rises and stuff either. Just a lot of people, are they going to turn them into residential? I was like, you understand the building code differences and plumbing and what a nightmare it would be to to get bathrooms and kitchens and stuff up to code in a commercial office space that was built out that way. 2 different building codes, 2 different fire suppression codes, 2 different codes for elevators and occupancy levels, and just everything that's about the building. There would have to be changes at the city level, right? There are places in Europe and stuff years ago. We had an offer to fly over, a couple of investors and myself. The country was paying to help do some of the conversions because they had such an overrun in office space, and they were trying to convert it to living space because they really needed living space. And the expense we were looking at was insane. It was, $100+ per square foot to do that conversion, but the country was covering part of the cost. I was brought in because they thought I was going to just throw money at it, and next thing you know, they were trying to schedule a flight for me to go somewhere, and I had a kid on the way, and I was like, I'm not going. So I didn't end up doing the deal. But that said, the space is so diverse. There's so many different things inside a commercial. I could definitely see if you're a company and you're going to be there and you know that you've got room to grow on that facility, 2x, 3x, or whatever you think you can grow, definitely owning the place makes sense. One thing I can say about the US, even when we've had corrections, they don't last for long, right? You look at the most brutal corrections of 2008, 2009, where these places like I'm in California now, where properties dropped 50% overnight. They're above that now, right? Just
Yeah.
a few short years later, they've surpassed that and regained that plus some. And there'll probably be another correction. I think everything's kind of in a bubble right now because I look around here and see people paying 1.5 million for a 3.2
Mhm.
in our area, and I'm thinking this has got to pop soon, but maybe not.
Well, some areas, as you know, is real estate is very local, right? And so some areas it's both extremes before we get this regression to the mean. But like California is definitely one of those very cyclical markets.
Yeah.
There are some markets that are much more consistent and stable, and as we would say, boring, but predictable, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I own a bunch of real estate, or I say own. I owned a lot of it's been. I got one of them closing tomorrow. A lot of it's being refinanced off, and I'm being paid off because I own or financed a lot of the houses. But in Tulsa, and that's never had a decline. They had a big run up recently. For the first time ever, I've had people I own or finance the house to them that when they come and say, "Hey, I want to move," and I have to just say, "Look, you really should put this on the market." Is you got 30 or 40,000. I know you've only been there for 6 years, but you got $40,000 of equity sitting there, right? The
Yeah,
house ran up. Now, I'd love to have that. It's mine if you leave and you don't sell it. If you just deed the house
right.
back to me, it's a contract for deed. If you deed it back to me and leave, that's my money. But if you put it on the market, I'll help you sell it. I'll even use my broker. She'll sell it for us. You get a big check, I get a big check, and that's the way it probably should work. I've got one
And
closing tomorrow where I'm getting 30 or so, and they're getting, probably 38 to 40 because of that
yeah,
run up. That said,
yeah.
not all markets are like that, right? So you've got markets that are different. On this commercial space, what are some of the advantages? I know you've got the book out there. What are some of the advantages as a business owner? Besides peace of mind that you're your own landlord, what are some of the advantages? There's got to be other advantages, either tax or otherwise, to owning that property.
Yeah, yeah. Well, starting with peace of mind, I don't normally start with that one, but peace of mind / control, right? So if you own the building and you mentioned the fact that you could have your diesel truck basically completely renovated right there because you own the business there. When you own the building, then you don't have to ask permission, right? So for instance, I have a great friend, Steve, who is a commercial builder, and he was 50/50 owner in this cabinet company as a side business. Well, he was able to buy out the other partner after a number of years, but the business had been profitable. The other guy had been operating it. But Steve is a very smart guy, and he knew that that business could be run much more efficiently. So he hired a guy to come manage and basically take over with what the other partner was doing. And this guy was like Six Sigma process guy. And anyway, they looked at the current work throughput and flow of operations and how it operated. And basically they redesigned the way that the product moved from, start to finish, bought a piece of new equipment that was sort of, well, cutting edge and high tech, right? Reorganized the entire, but rebuilt the whole space, basically knocked down all the walls, which he could do because he owned the building. And they were able to keep essentially the same staff they had, and they almost doubled their output on the same input just by retooling and reorganizing the space. And so he didn't have to ask anybody. So if you lease the space, you might be able to do that. You might not be able to do that, right? And if you do that, then you're improving someone else's building, right? Because you're going to lease or improve.
Is he looking to retire? I told you I had clients that I'm joking because semi-joking. I told you I have clients where I help do growth through acquisitions. One of them is a cabinet maker and woodworking roll-up. They bought a company in Australia already. We're looking here in the United States, and so
Yeah.
if he's looking to retire, we should talk afterwards. But
I
or
don't know.
or even advise, right? Because we're gonna revamp from the ones that we're looking at. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I could definitely connect you guys up. He's a great guy. Very, very successful commercial builder. But that's one example. So another example of control, I had a client that owned a couple pizza shops,
mhm.
and he was an immigrant here, been here for like, I don't know, 15 years. But these shops have been up and running for about 8 or 9 years. He was renting both spaces. And you know how locally oriented like a pizza shop is, right? I mean, there's one in every other corner, it seems like. So you can't just pick up and move and drop everything and expect to A, find a similar space, and B, to retain your client base. He invested about 80,000 in the kitchen and getting it the way he wanted of a leased building, but nonetheless, he wanted to make his business profitable. He gets a knock on the door one day, and it's the landlord, and he says, "Hey, Osmond, I'm telling him to sell the building." what do you do? And fortunately, he gave him first right of refusal. And so we were able to work together and help him buy the space. But that's not always the case. You're at that point, the time has run out, all the grains have dropped through the hourglass. And now it's like you either can or you can't. And if the landlord might have a bigger vision, maybe there's a higher and a better use case for that space. To your point, maybe a Wawa wants to come in and or a Sheet and mow it down and build a giant gas station. And good luck on that. So you've got autonomy and control. Any changes and things you make, you're improving your own facility versus somebody else's facility. I alluded to it in the beginning. Another benefit is this wasted money that we call rent, right? Most leases you're going to sign, you're going to have escalations built in year to year to year. And again, you're trading your rent for a value. You're getting value because you have a place to run your business. So that's win-win. As long as that arrangement is still a beneficial arrangement to the landlord, then you're able to stay there. So at lease renewal, they don't have to renew your lease, right? It's the negotiation standpoint. Again, if the market has changed significantly, you could face a larger than expected rent increase, which could affect your net bottom line operating profit. Or the landlord could say, well, we're not going to renew the lease for whatever reason. But the flip side of that is, by owning the space, every month you're not paying rent. Yes, you're paying interest and you're paying taxes and insurance on the building, but you're making a deposit into the equity bank every single month. So it becomes a forced savings plan for a lot of professionals and small businesses that start making decent income. A lot of them tend to graduate their lifestyle up to their income level, right? We start making good money, we're like spending money. Okay. So, all right, well, you look back, you talked about when you owned the paying business that you were spending all the money, you're making good money, spending all the money. Okay. Well, that's what happens with a lot of small businesses as well. They want to get a little nice car, they want to get a little bigger house, they get a boat, they want to do these things, which is all fine and good. But meanwhile, they're chunking out money at rent where a portion of that money could be going into that forced savings program, which is building equity. They can lock that payment in as well and not be faced with rent escalations every single month. Is another advantage. The property value appreciation, we had this conversation. You can't really bet on appreciation year to year to year, but generally speaking, and depending on the market, over time, the property is going to go up in value, right? So 5, 10, 15 years, it's probably going to be worth a lot more than it is today if you bought it well. Again, no guarantee there, but a pretty high probability on that. Whereas if you rent, not so much the case. There are some tax advantages to it as well from just the way you would structure it. A lot of people will set up a real estate holding company to buy the real estate, and then their operating company will pay rent to their real estate holding company. You can literally pay a market rent and you can build in rent escalations to yourself. And meanwhile, you have a fixed mortgage. And so that, basically profit coming into your holding company and you're depreciating against that passive income is one way to do it. You have opportunities there on the tax side for potentially 1031 exchange downstream if you wanted to grow into another building, a larger building. My gosh, if you wanted to, as your equity grows, you could do, I think I heard you say this too, you could do a cash out refinance of the building because now you have equity and now you're basically taking money tax-free out of the building without paying any kind of a capital gain on that to redeploy, maybe use it to buy a competitor. I've seen people do that. So, wow, I could keep going on and on. How about the opportunity to leverage the space, not just for that, but to bring in other tenants? Like I have a client, we just closed on a 12,000 square foot warehouse where he's ground up flex warehouse space, which is in high demand in the part of Virginia he's at. And he's taking 8,000 feet for his business and he's leasing out the other 4 already leased and he hasn't even broken ground yet. And the lease rent from those 2 tenants is going to almost pay the freight on the entire mortgage. So he's going to have almost no mortgage. These guys are paying down for him. And oh, by the way, as his business grows, because he expects to grow over the next 5 to 10 years, he can just non-renew their leases and expand into their space. He's got a built-in growth plan right there in the building. So there's a few right there that are benefits and opportunity that we see, and for reasons why people that want to do it. We talk about selling a business, right? Well, you talk about sale leaseback. Well, it's hard to lease back the building if you don't own it, right? I mean, in the sale, the opportunities to create creative financing for buyers with there's real estate as part of the transaction versus just the business and blue sky. It creates more opportunity, and a lot of times it can bring more buyers to the table than if you're just trying to finance blue sky. So there's a lot of benefits and potential benefits that can be realized from it if it makes sense. It's not for a startup, right? It's not for someone who doesn't have a solid history of profit and a forecast of future growth, right? They got to get their sea legs first in the business before it makes sense. But, if you're into a 5-year lease, then you're coming up on your 5th year and you ought to be pretty stable and profitable at that point. If you don't, then definitely don't look at owning yet.
I've seen one company falter because the landlord did something different. We had a gentleman who owned a historic burger joint, of all things, right across the street from one of our residential places. And they were there since the 50s. I think he bought it from some gentleman that started it, but they didn't buy the land. They had a landlord, a family-owned trust or something had it. Then, about 5, 6 years ago, the parent company of like Taco Bell, the franchise and stuff, they offered him $3.5 million for the spot, right? The landlords. So they
Right.
bulldozed down the house. I mean, they basically had him move. Now he's got to find a new location for his burger joint where everybody from they went there, their grandparents went there, their great grandparents went there. Now he's got to know that it moved somewhere down the street. And you show up to buy a burger, and it's been bulldozed down, and there's a Taco Bell, Kentucky Fried Chicken, something else combo in the same spot, like the 3 little drive-throughs, and it was a beautiful spot right off the highway. He had highway frontage for his signs, everything grew up around it. There are some businesses where if your location is critical to your business, you probably ought to own the location. And a lot of
Yeah.
businesses you think of that you don't think are location critical, maybe. Like I had a slight partnership, a minority stake in a little martial arts studio back when I was much thinner and would teach martial arts. And we needed to move the facility just by probably 600 yards around the block. And we lost 22% of the students just from the move, right? People are so used to going there, and it was a tough school anyway. Like we beat each other up pretty good in there. So I think they would just use it as an excuse or whatever. But we lost a lot of students and the other one had street frontage, so a lot of people got to see it every time when they drove by. So say they
Yeah.
missed a week or 2, but they drove by it every day on the way home. Now it's out of sight, out of mind.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think. Well, finish your thought, but just to dovetail on that, I had a guy that owned an HVAC company. He had been buying up little HVACs and kind of building this larger one,
Mhm.
and he just bought a piece of land with a building on 5 acres right on the main highway. It's one of these, not like a freeway; it's a highway, but is most of the traffic in the town goes right in front of there. And so now he's got all this truck line up there. He saves, I think he was paying 4 or 5,000 a month on a billboard. He can take that down because now he's got it right there on his property, and he's got room to expand and build as much space as he could ever want or need. And just by positioning himself right there in that location, a better location than he was before,
Yeah.
combine the two.
There's another one where I just looked at one here. There's another scenario where it's really critical that you be the owner of your business, right? So this company was they had the license to manufacture one form of trailers. So they could make custom trailers for, when I say trailers, utility trailers, farm trailers, horse trailers, dump bed trailers, that type of stuff. And when I say manufacture, they could custom make it so they could, if you want a triple axle, they could put that. If you needed certain weighted axles, they could build that. But they had about 4 or 5 acres of a lot, and then they had their building where they built these things out. And it was up for sale. The price was good. The revenue was good. But when I went to talk to, I'm a farm boy by trade, so I thought that it appealed to me. I've owned quite a few of those trailers in my other businesses, real estate and stuff. I thought this would be a cool one. It's not, it's got 2 sales reps and a couple maintenance guys and a couple guys working in the custom shop, and it's low maintenance. Money was good until I talked to the landlord. Landlord was a buddy of his, been leasing him land for
Mhm.
25, 30 years, and the condos around him, this is California, Sonoma Valley wine country, about 45 miles north of me. The landlords, the condos around him had been offering him an insane amounts of money for his 5 acres because they built up around him to the tune of millions. And he's like, look, I know the guy's trying to retire and sell his business, but you're going to have to move it because I would need some insane amount for rent to justify letting it stay there when all these people, like this opportunities eventually go away. And it kind of stuck out too because it was like this 5 acres of trailers, and it was. I was gonna paint the building, put a privacy fence around their scrapyard because they had axles and stuff piled up and make it look nicer anyway. But when you walk into a place like that, I could really give it, coat of paint and a 6-foot privacy fence would give this place a lot more appeal. That said, there's no way he's gonna ever sell that business. It's not sellable because it has to move. And
Right.
multi-generations around here, all these vineyards and farms. Around here where I live, it's either a city, a cattle farm, or a vineyard, right? There's no in between. Like, that's just if they can grow vines on it, there's wine growing or white wine grapes. If they can't, it's cattle. If it's too hilly or too whatever, it's a cattle farm or dairy farm. Other than that, it's got houses built on it. That said, that business is not sellable, right? He's got a business now where if he moves it, he's gonna lose such large percentage of his customers. Like, if you think about all the old farms and stuff like that, their granddad bought this thing's been around for a long time. He bought it from somebody else. Their granddad bought trailers from that particular spot. They know when they get them repaired, people, they jump in their car and they drive to that spot. They don't even call ahead. They just drive up there and go, "Hey, can you fix this today?" "Oh, tomorrow I'll just drop it off and pick it up." That's the name of his game and his business. They're gonna show up one day and it's gone, and there's gonna be a sign that says for a week or 2, there might be a sign that says, "We moved 4 blocks over," then the sign's gonna be gone, and
Mhm.
I'll be honest with you, I had multiple trailers and worked with companies that had multiple of them. I had 2 repair guys. I can't tell you what the name of the and they repaired everything we touched, but I don't remember the name of their business. I just know exactly we took them over. I tell my guys, "Go over to so and so street, drop it off, talk to John, he'll get it done, and he'll have it done in a day or 2." Right? We knew exactly where it would go, and, like, I just had a guy on the show here who bought 3 locations in Dallas doing trailers, and he said, "Location is critical." If somebody had to up his location, right, and move him to different spots, he'd be in trouble.
Yeah, so it's not only an offensive move, but it's a defensive move, right?
Mhm.
To your point there, that you're protecting your asset, right? Because a business is an asset that you maybe it's the lifestyle business, but maybe you want to sell it one day, or maybe you want to pass it to the next generation, to your kid. And if you have real estate, there are ways to do that too, with some tax advantage, stepping up of values and things like that. But the reality is that it's not just, I think, in terms of opportunity cost, right? So what opportunity am I losing by not doing it? You don't have to do it, of course, right? You don't have to do anything. But there's a lot of people out there that will gladly lease you their space so you can pay for their building and build their wealth in their future, right? Until they decide they want to put condos on the land, right? Because that really accelerates their use of our wealth creation. But I mean, opportunity cost. You think about what you're giving up every month that you make that payment, and that you're doubling. You go from one business to two because now you have a real estate business that's independent of your operating business, right? And what I've seen a lot, Ronald, with some of our clients, a lot of the professionals and a lot of the service companies will go out and they'll buy not just a building, but they'll buy multiple buildings where they're operating, like over in the part of Virginia that we're headquartered in, down towards the beach. There's like some major cities there, and so there's one dentist that every couple of years they'll open a new location in a different city. They're only 20 minutes from each other, but they build this beautiful 10,000 square foot building, and they hire a young dentist out of college, out of dental school, put them up in there to run it and give them a decent salary. But the dentist who owns the business and the practice is really building his real estate empire and letting somebody else. It's almost like the McDonald's thing, right?
Right.
Where McDonald's was in the business in the real estate. They're really in the real estate business, but they sell hamburgers to pay the freight. Same thing there. I have friends that just sold a couple of car washes and made big bucks. Their whole mission was to find real estate in a high value, high traffic area. And we're going to put a car wash there so we can pay the freight on the land while the property appreciates in value. And these are two kids that started out of college 15 years ago that just sold for 8 figures and had done really well. And they traded up, selling these really small ones in the beginning and using the 1031 exchange to larger. And they kept doing that and were able to get a number of locations. And so that multi-location sort of strategy, you talk about business acquisitions, that's another way to do it, right? I can plant my flag and, if you could expand and open a new location every 2 to 3 years and own the real estate, and then chiropractors are doing that, right? I'm going to hire a chiropractor out of school and I'm going to mentor them and let them run the office. And then if they ever leave and decide they want to go, I'll offer them a little piece of the business, right? So that hopefully they'll hang around. And if not, I'll hire another young one out of college and let him run. Meanwhile, they're paying for my real estate. And instead of having one building that's now appreciating in value and the debt being serviced and paid off, I've got two of them or three of them or four of them or five of them. And a lot of times the financing terms for owner user space are is much more favorable than just straight up investment space when it comes to leverage and down payment and that sort of thing.
It's interesting is you got both sides, right? You got the McDonald's model you were talking about who was buying the real estate and, the business pays down the real estate and they own as much real estate as they do anything else. And then you got like the CVS or where I'm from originally, Oklahoma, and they have some down in Texas now, the Quick Trip model, right? So CVS, Quick Trip, and those guys, they'll go out and build a facility and then they sell that facility off and lease it back from them for a guaranteed return on investment to investors. So if you are a real estate investor, you could either fund the building of a new gas station, Quick Trip, what these things are, mega gas stations, or a CVS. And the lease terms are really favorable, but CVS looks at it as a way to redeploy the capital faster, expand faster, and grow faster. So there's both sides of this coin and they've got their contracts are pretty solid. You're not going to kick them out. They may do a 15-year lease from now, but 15 years, they have their first right of refusal to renew or buy it or to renew the lease or buy it back. So if you try to sell it on the open market, they have first right of refusal, but there's a clause that you can put inside of things, drag or tag. So if you negotiate with the lease and it's unfavorable, they can drag you to sell and buy it back at open market rates. So they can force you to sell it back to them, I think. At least I was told that. I didn't get to look at the lease. I know somebody invested in one, and he said, yeah, at the end of this, if we don't agree on terms, they can force an appraisal and pay me and buy the real estate back from me at current market value.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that is an interesting model. In fact, ironically, the car wash guys I was talking about, they use some of the proceeds from the sale. They 1031 some of that into a couple of these buildings where they built one for a large national mattress company. It's going to be, very solid lease, right? And they did a couple of them. And so I think that's a valid strategy as well. Most smaller business people, though, aren't really able to pull that model off, And so you have to look at the capital investment there versus investing in what you're already spending. And then if you can leverage, because most of the people, our clients aren't building 10, 20, 50, 100 unit in a fairly short period of time, although some can and some do. But there's different ways to skin the cat for sure.
So let's talk about what does it look like? How do they approach their landlord? What's that conversation? You've been in this for 5 years and you're thinking, okay, I probably need to own this building. At the 5-year mark, you've got your market. If you think about the business life cycle, right? And how many businesses fell within the first 10 years, the number starts to taper down after 10. And you're on solid footing if you made it past the 10-year market and you're profitable. But at 5 years, you still could be filling out your product market fit. You're still probably in a growth cycle and stuff like that. If you need to move, that could be a very serious strategic decision to whether or not it's viable. If you're a burger joint, probably not. If you're a dentist office, maybe if you can really communicate well with your clients and maybe you can find a place that has better street frontage and some other advantages. But I think it's such a strategic move, it could make or break you at early stage. But let's say it's a good deal. You think, okay, this is a great location. I need to buy this location. How do you approach that landlord? What does that initial conversation look like?
Yeah, I mean, there's no boilerplate answer there. A lot of it depends on what kind of relationship that you have with a landlord. If you've had a very collegial relationship the whole time, then it's one of those things that you approach with a perspective of, first of all, you don't approach them 30 days from lease renewal. Okay. Very bad timing. You want to start the conversations, 12 months out, maybe even 18 months out, because maybe this isn't your first 5-year lease, or not your first 3-year lease or something. So you want to approach from the standpoint of sort of information gathering up front. You're like, hey, Mr. Landlord, Mrs. Landlord, our business is doing well. This has been a great opportunity for us. We love this location. We're hoping that you would agree with that. We're at a point in our business where we're considering the opportunity, the idea of maybe buying a building or building our own space or doing something like that. I know we've got lease renewal potentially in the next year or so. Have you ever considered selling the building that we're in? And just kind of letting them kind of field that question to kind of see where they are, because you never know. Could be that they might be looking to liquidate their investment because they've got other goals. Maybe they want to sort of punch out and move to Florida or somewhere else, and they don't want to have to be responsible for a lease. Maybe they've got other needs, or maybe they want to deploy the capital in some other way, or maybe not, right? You just really don't know. But the first step is to have that conversation, because you might be surprised. The other thing about it is, I tell people all the time, there's about 5 ways that you can buy a building, and versus cash, which we generally don't recommend. But the second is seller financing. So, they may be willing to sell, and they might even be willing to do the finance, which in many cases would be the easiest, cheapest, simplest way to go about it. So it's really just floating the trial balloon in a respectful manner to kind of see where they're coming from. And even they may at that point legitimately say, no, we've not really considered it. We don't intend to sell it. But you're so far out in the lease process that you've planted a seed with them. And you might could then revisit it in a month or two and say, hey, have you thought any more about it? Or you may not need to revisit it. They might be thinking about it or have, kicking around the idea, since you've sort of broached the idea. Because as a real estate owner, it's one thing to sell a property, and you think about, I just sold a house and we moved, and it's like, you think about all you got to do to, get the place ready, and you got to clean up the attic, and then you got to do all these little maintenance things. And then you got to hire an agent, and, all this money and time and hassle. But it's a whole nother issue if the current tenant says, hey, I'm basically wanting to buy this and write a check, which means I don't have any hassle. I don't have any real estate agent. I don't have any of that, very easy for them. So it's a great conversation starter and an easy way to approach the idea and the topic and plant a seed anyway. And then now you have a sense where they are. But I think the big takeaway here is be thinking about it 12 to 18 months out before that lease comes up, because then you have lots of time to consider all the options and make an intelligent decision. I get people all the time call us up, they're 30 to 60 days out and they want to do a deal. And I'm like, okay, you're not a good place to be, right? You're under the gun. You're going to make decisions that probably aren't the best decisions for you or your business. And so take some time, have some time, approach it before it's too late and pressure's involved.
I get that. And you're saying, I mean, what's the time to close a commercial loan? It's got to be 60, 90 days anyway.
Yeah, 60 minute day.
Yeah. So
Yep.
you got to have that. And that's after you've come up with agreed to terms with the landlord. And even if you do the owner finance, unless you're a seasoned real estate investor like yourself or myself, you're going to need somebody else to draw up that paperwork. That you're still probably going to do a little bit of due diligence, maybe a little building inspection and electrical and stuff to make sure you're not buying something that you're going to have to put a lot of money into you didn't expect. So there's some time and some work that has to be done before you do that. In a commercial building, I kind of want it code inspected. I want a commercial building inspector to come out and say that your fire suppression system. Some of these things are outrageously expensive, right?
Yes.
My fire suppression
Yes.
system's up to code. So is my heat and air system, and so is other stuff. A lot of this stuff in some cities and towns kicks in when the change of ownership changes hands. The change of ownership means you're gonna have the fire marshal come by and visit the place, or the
Right.
city code and code inspector's gonna come by and check out the place. It's kind of one of their things that triggers a visit.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. You want to do all due diligence for, the lenders. We do it because we want to protect all parties. But if there's no lender involved, you definitely want to make sure you're protected, including getting an appraisal. You want to make sure you're not overpaying for a property that, just because the seller says, well, I'll sell it to you for half.
Yeah.
What's the justification for that, right?
I heard a good one was that building I was telling you about, my business partner. I helped negotiate purchasing the building. I owned a small piece of it. Everything looked good. They had a brand, one of the, it had three, it was only 3,700, it was less than 4,000 square feet. And so it was a small commercial building and had big conference area and some classrooms and some small offices, and had three different zones for AC. One of them was brand new and the other two were a little aged, and they were running good when we bought it. Within probably 12 to 18 months of doing the owner finance and structure and the payments and everything, the other two, it hit 110 in Oklahoma, and the old units couldn't keep up with the new units. And our heat and air guy said just the offset from them being different like that caused strain on some of the other ones. And like the new unit, we ended up having to have the new unit repaired and both the other ones replaced to the tune of, I say we, that was my business partner had to do it. It was, $10,000, $12,000 worth of units.
Yeah.
And you can't not do it because it was a co-working space. We had other tenants there. So it's not like we could just go and say it'll be hot and we'll be there. We run the real estate investment group out of it and the training center out of it. I had my pest control company that would office, that's where we kept our filing. We had two different locations. So you said earlier, like you could move a pest control company, or you might be able to do that remotely if you had trucks. Anything that stores chemicals has to have a registered place where the chemicals are stored in a certain way. They're locked up. Can be inspected and stuff. So that facility was on a commercial farm we owned, and it had commercial. So we just stored the chemicals there because we already have stuff for the cattle and everything else. My business partner has a cattle operation, so we already had that was already inspected. So we put all the chemicals in a lockbox in his big barn, and that was part of our facility. And all the files and all the file keeping was in our office. That said, had we done, a full due diligence on the building, we probably would have seen that those two other units were a little aged and might be able to negotiate the price down on that. I think he still got a good deal.
Yeah, well, yeah, so sure, you definitely want to do due diligence. That's part of the process, and that can be negotiated and generally is, and it can be reflected in the terms of the pricing or whatnot. But again, you're not necessarily married to any one particular space or one particular building. One of the things that a lot of our folks do is they build something new, and it's expensive to build something new, but you can build it just the way you want it, and you can build for future expansion, and therefore you'll mitigate a lot of those, unforeseen costs up front. But I think the takeaway is there is a timeline in the commercial. A lot of business owners have never bought commercial. They bought 2 or 3 homes or 4 homes, or maybe some single family investments. And the residential real estate finance is a lot different than commercial, right? It's much more sort of boilerplate, plain vanilla. You have Fannie, Freddie out there mostly making all the rules, and everyone is kind of operating within that world. So everyone has pretty much the same rule set. But commercial, not necessarily the case. I mean, you have conventional bank lending, you have lots of private money and sources that are going to be all over the map, from insurance companies to family offices, you mentioned, to just private investors. And then the SBA has a couple of programs, the 7A and the 504, which are guarantee programs. And they're more like Fannie Freddie, where they control the rules and everything, but they also create a lot of leverage for business owners. Done right with the right investor, the right funder, can allow some pretty crazy things. Like, if you're buying real estate, if you go to the bank, they're going to want 20, 25% down. But if you're owner user and you go the SBA route with the right investors and the business is profitable, you can get in with 0% down in a lot of cases. So you're really leveraging, because that's a big like stop for a lot of people. They go talk to the local banker that's got all their deposits and was their best buddy, right? And they think with any 20% down on $1 million building or $2 million building, and they're like, that's a lot of money to take out of my operating account and put into bricks and mortar. And I agree, it's a lot. And generally, we don't recommend it. There are exceptions, but we'd rather see you keep the money in the operating account and dry powder and use it for growing your business than stick it in the bricks. So that's a myth that a lot of people sort of run into, but it's very different than residential. And there's so many variables that come into play. It is 60 to 90 days once you sort of identify that you negotiate the property and the terms, and then we move into it. And a lot of the financial pieces are handled up front. And so we like to work with clients to sort of uncover early and often any issues and address all that. Because if you do all that and you get the financial house in order up front, then it can be shorter. It can be 60 days versus 60 to 90. In a much more stress-free experience. Because I tell people, it's like, well, in commercial and even residential today, but definitely in commercial, they're going to find out about it in the process, right? When you go to finance.
So the only commercial building I looked at was a business that I was looking to acquire before I even got into this space. And the commercial loan actually startled me a little bit because I'm so used to residential. And it was amortized over, I want to say I had a choice between amortizing the loan over 15 or 20 years. I didn't think they had a 30-year option, but they had a 5-year balloon. So even though it was amortized over a longer period, my payments were, I had to requalify for the loan every 5 years. So basically there's a balloon, like, and I said, "Well, what does that mean?" It was like, "We have to come back here and requalify for the loan, show us your business financials and move forward." And I was like, "That's horrible." I go to another bank and they said, "Well, you got to requalify every 3 years." They had a 3-year, like, and I'm like, "What is this?" And I guess that's normal inside of some of these commercial, especially for a first time business loan buying guy. That's very, very common. We did stumble across one that loaned us the money on that one building had a 30-year amortized, like, it's just like a residential mortgage, but it was like
Mhm.
3,700 square. Like I said, it was a smaller one, but only one I'd seen where, we reviewed the mortgage and that was what it was.
Yeah, yeah. Typically, that's right. When you go to a bank, your conventional financing is going to be a 3 to 5 to 7 year term with a balloon, and then it's amortized over 15 to 20 years. Most typically, what we see is 25-year AMs, sometimes 30, and we do have some fixed rates that'll go out 25 years. I mean, it's definitely there are some more residential like opportunities out there. You just have to know what you're looking for, and it has to make sense for the particular borrower. But you're probably not going to get that when you walk into a local bank because they don't want their money out there that far. They're pretty risk averse at the end of the day, right? As we all know, and they talk about how much they love small business, but that's just a marketing line. They love small businesses. Deposit is what they want.
We just hit new heights on the stock exchange, but, inflation is running wild. So I can see why the bank just like they want long-term gains with short-term bets, right? So, I can
That's
get
right.
that. How does somebody reach out to you if they're in your market or if they just I don't know if you do advising outside of your licensed brokered area, but,
Well, we do. We work nationally. Our main focus, Ronald, is we let you get in the front of a transaction. So when someone that's 6 to 12 to 18 months out and they're considering this idea, that's when we like to talk to somebody.
mhm.
Because our main business is really understanding their business, evaluating and educating, and then really advising on options. Because we discuss the market because we have funding sources, whether we fund it or we have other funding sources nationally. We can show someone sort of the pluses and minuses of each, of whether conventional or private or SBA and the different SBA programs, because they all have pros and cons. Like, do you want to put your house on the line? Do you not want to put your house on the line? Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we can mitigate that and get around that. And so that's really our value. So, after education, then we will facilitate if they want us to in getting the funding in place. But to reach out and find the simplest way, we've got a website, ownyourbuildingnow.com, ownyourbuildingnow.com. And then they can pick up a free copy of the book, Unlease Your Business. I'll ship it out, just pay for shipping and printing. In addition to that, on that site, I have an assessment, it's like a 2-minute assessment, 20 questions. Someone can basically go through and I'll ask questions regarding sort of where they are business wise, revenue, cash flow. And the whole thing is to come back and give you a result in 4 categories about, are you sort of buyer ready? So it's very neat. We had somebody put that together and build it. It offers some pretty interesting insights. And then lastly, they can schedule a time, what we call another strategy call, which basically it's a 20-minute call. We're just kind of chat and find out if it's something that potentially could make sense or not for their situation. But that's on the site there as well. So that's what we do.
Awesome, awesome. So if somebody listened to the show and they only walk away with 2 or 3 things, what would you want them the takeaways to be?
My takeaway would be is that if you have a business that's local and has a need for a local presence, and you've got a pretty decent runway ahead of you, you're not punching out in the next 2, 3, 4 years. You need to at least consider the option or the opportunity of buying some kind of space to run your business in. Whether you do it or not is irrelevant, but you need to at least consider the opportunity and explore it because it could be transformational 10, 15, 20 years downstream for you and your business. And the other takeaway would be that if there's something that you're interested in, don't wait to the last minute. This is not, I see a house in the market, I want to go buy it and put an offer in to be in next week. It's a process and you want to make an intelligent decision. And so get advice from people that know, and whether you have them or we have them, the attorney, the real estate broker, the appraiser, important professionals that can give you the information you need to make an intelligent decision.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we covered the topic fairly well. We'll call that a show.
Awesome. Well, I enjoyed it. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you. And hang out for just a minute when this is done. I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between $5 million and $30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT-enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace, how to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.